Hello everyone, and welcome to my TimeSplitters Future Perfect video. So for those that watched my TimeSplitters 2 video, and if you haven't you can check it out at the card in the corner if you missed it, then you would know that by and large my overall impressions of TimeSplitters 2 were fairly positive. Hell, even basically saying it's one of the best FPS games ever made. With that said, I did very much play the follow-up quite extensively, that obviously being TimeSplitters Future Perfect. But how well does it hold up today? Well, TimeSplitters Future Perfect was released back on March 21st, 2005 for the GameCube, PlayStation 2, and Xbox in North America, with those in Europe getting the game on the 24th, and it was developed once again by Free Radical Design. This would also be the first entry to also include online play, but only on the PlayStation 2 and Xbox versions of the game, and not the GameCube release. Now, pretty much with regards to TimeSplitters Future Perfect, this would also be another title that I would play pretty much in my spare time when I wasn't doing anything in my day. And this would also be another game that I remember playing quite extensively with some of the friends that I had at the time. So with that all out of the way, why don't we go ahead and talk about the game's campaign. And yes, they actually did go out of their way to create a campaign that simply wasn't just travel to one area, look for a time crystal, and then peace out of that time period. Though with that being said, if you have not experienced TimeSplitters Future Perfect at all, then I would recommend to stop watching this video and go out and play the game and then come back for my overall thoughts, because we will be covering everything in full. With those wishing to stay for the ride, let's go ahead and talk about TimeSplitters Future Perfect. So TimeSplitters Future Perfect takes place right after the events of the first game, with Sergeant Cortez leaving the space station that he ended up nuking basically. We see him crash land on Earth, but in the future where everything is very much dry and not very green and lush. After he awakens, he is greeted by some fellow Marines and they make their way through the valley fighting off enemies who they are unfamiliar with. He meets up with his general and an individual by the name of Anya, who will basically be assisting Cortez throughout his journey. Cortez brings them the time crystals and wants to use them to go back into the past to explore the various time jumps that were made and ultimately stop the TimeSplitters race from ever being created. His first mission takes him right to the year 1924 where he meets up with Captain Ash, who was actually in the previous TimeSplitters game. Don't worry, we're going to be seeing a number of individuals in the campaign from the previous game, and requests the aid of Cortez. After raiding the castle, Cortez stumbles upon an individual who has a large sum of time crystals, who then ends up escaping with his own time machine. Cortez then ends up traveling to 1969 where we see Harry Tipper, who mentions to Cortez how the individual that is with Kalos, who Harry Tipper has foiled his plans a number of times, is seeking to gain eternal life, and that he needs Kalos to provide him a small army in return. So Cortez not only helps Tipper in killing Kalos, but also helps him to save his girlfriend. Anya chimes in and states how in 1994 a mansion in Connecticut had burned to the ground. Now it was actually the headquarters of the Brotherhood of Ultra Science, which is where the next mission takes place. He meets up with a girl by the name of Jo Beth Casey and states that the mansion is actually haunted with ghouls and ghosts running around. After basically going through one of the scariest missions in an FPS game, for me at the very least, they discover that the individual who is also the creator of the TimeSplitters to be a man by the name of Dr. Jacob Crow. After this discovery, the mission now is to destroy all of his labs that are scattered throughout various time periods that Crow has visited and set up shop within. Cortez ends up traveling about 60 years into the future, where Crow has now advanced his gene-splitting experiments. He meets up with an individual who goes by the name Amy, who was sent out on a mission to stop Crow in his tracks, and the two partner up and fight their way through Crow's lab facility to catch up to him and stop him. And unfortunately, when they do find him, he also ends up escaping, so womp womp. Cortez makes the notion that Crow must have time traveled even further, about 200 years further, knowing that his plans would fail in that time period and would then continue onward into the future to further his research. Cortez makes another time jump at this point, where robots and machines now rule the planet and have begun waging war on the humans. Cortez sort of drops in and hacks into one of the machines that is aptly named R110, and they team up together. Cortez also teams up with a small group of rebels who are fighting back against the machines to continue their journey to where Crow is located, which is now a much larger and much more powerful lab that is also filled with numerous TimeSplitter embryos. Cortez attempts to destroy as much of the lab as he can, but is unable to take down Crow, as he is now combined himself with a TimeSplitter race and a war machine. Anya decides to send Cortez as well as R110 back to 1924 to stop Crow from being able to make any progress on his lab experiments in the first place. So back in 1924 again, Cortez and R110 make their way to where Crow is, with the two discovering that Dr. Crow has now fused himself with a large bipedal robot. I mean, yeah, alright my guy, whatever works. During their scuffle, Crow ends up destroying Cortez's ally R110, which only leaves him and Crow to duke it out. With Cortez certain that he will be unable to take on Crow by himself, Anya makes the call to send Cortez back in time just before he first arrived, with the hopes of being able to tag team with his past self and take on Crow along with R110, which thanks to the time loop wasn't destroyed. After they meet up and tag team Crow, he is finally taken down, and Cortez puts a raw crystal into the device which he found earlier that ends up causing a chain reaction which ends up destroying the entire compound. Anya warps the two Cortezes and R110 back to HQ, only leaving the time crystals and Crow in the wake of the destruction. Cortez and Anya then observe the barren land outside transform back into its original state, as forests sprout up all around showing off actual life, then dead and deserted wastelands. However, after all of this, the temporal uplink as well as R110 disappear, which is due to the time paradox. Also, Cortez and Anya probably went off and spent a lovely evening together, but hey, that's neither here nor there, so yeah. And that, everyone, is TimeSplitters' Future Perfect story, and well, the story itself is pretty alright. There are a lot of memorable moments that are scattered throughout the game's missions, and overall, you get a number of characters that are pretty awesome when it comes to the dialogue side of things, or simply the way in which they act in the campaign. Amy Chen, I thought, was one of the characters in the game that bounced off of Cortez in some of the cutscenes really well, especially when you see her get into action where she shows off that she means business. Even someone such as Harry Tipper was great to see, and he was pretty goofy most of the time, especially when he finds himself disguised as a woman and one of the guards totally trying to hit on him, with Tipper doing some of the worst women impressions I've ever seen. It's fantastic. With regards to the overall difficulty of the campaign, I'll admit there wasn't many, if at all, tricky moments for me throughout my entire playtime with the campaign. There wasn't any kind of bullshit that was thrown your way, and as long as you were playing smart, you were basically pretty safe for the most part. The only level I saw there being any sort of real trouble would probably be the Mansion of Madness, and the following level, What Lies Below. Now, despite the fact that these two missions are straight up horror fuel, and it pretty much gave me nightmares in my younger years, and I am not kidding about that, there are moments where you are dealing with zombies armed with double-barreled shotguns, and I guess it's in a way a throwback to the first TimeSplitters game, but dealing with these bastards and their overall damage output can be pretty rough at times. Especially given the fact some just lay there faking their own death, and you can't even get the preemptive on them, and instead have to progress up to a certain point, and then you can get the kill on them. It's a little annoying, but hey, it's whatever, I suppose. The mission You Genius, You Gen X has a section where you play as a multitude of Cortezes, and I'm not even going to try to wrap my brain around how this is even possible. But regardless, you have to do a number of puzzles as well as fight sequences to the point where if you mess up at all during this, then it's back to the very first part of the section, and honestly, it's pretty terrible. The boss fights are, for the most part, not too challenging, and it can easily be taken care of pretty simply with the right weapon or simply using grenades followed up by strafing around them. Something that was also changed up with regards to the campaign was that in the previous TimeSplitters game was, depending on the difficulty you had selected, it would dictate the number of objectives that needed to be completed, and that the higher the difficulty, the more objectives you needed to do. With TimeSplitters Future Perfect, regardless of the difficulty chosen, the number of tasks that need to be completed are the same across all difficulties. To me, it's kind of a shame to see this, as I thought the way in which TimeSplitters 2 handled difficulty was great, but hey, at the end of the day, it leads to pretty much only needing to worry about the damage output of enemies being bumped up a little bit more now. Now, I'm sure for a fact that if you're to do any sort of deep analysis with the game's story, you could easily pick out the inconsistencies and flaws that it has with regards to its overall storytelling. But for me, I played through the story to simply have fun with the cast of characters that Cortez meets on his journey to take out Crow, and don't really look into the nitty-gritty of things with the whole time traveling ordeal, as it's more for fun, diverse encounters, and environments more than anything else. Oh yeah, I kind of forgot to mention this in my TimeSplitters 2 video, but you can do this in this game as well, and that is to be able to play with another person throughout the campaign, which I think is pretty awesome, but unfortunately when I recorded this playthrough, I didn't get another person to play with me, so whoops. Alright, with everything talked about with regards to the campaign, how about we move on and talk about the arcade and challenges. So TimeSplitters still has the good old arcade and challenges mode respectively. The arcade mode is still broken up into 3 categories, that being the Amateur League, the Honorary League, and then finally the Elite League. The further you progress through the league, the tougher the missions become when attempting to score for the higher trophies in the arcade, as well as the challenge mode. The ratings are still the same from TimeSplitters 2. You have the trophies that go from respectively bronze, silver, gold, and of course the ultimate platinum trophy. Now, if I'm going to be brutally honest with you, I found the Arcade League to be by and large pretty doable. I mean, yeah, you got some stinkers like the mission of Pox of Mox, which honestly is just manipulating the AI as you're playing a zones match, and it's simply you and no one else against a team of Kuzer Moxes. I hope I pronounced that right. Which at first blows because you're trying to figure out how in the world you're going to hold all the points for as long as possible before they just show up and ruin your day, basically. But hey, once you figure it out, I suppose it's not the worst thing ever, but I mean, come on, did we really need a one versus everything, especially with it being an objective-based mode? Then you have the Ninja Garden mission, where it's the good old monkey assistant, which honestly, I really didn't like the game mode back in TimeSplitters 2, and I still don't like it here. Look, I mean, if you like it, then hey, it's no big deal, but for me, I never found myself enjoying the mode all too much. Though that really is it for the missions that I found to be just not all that much fun to play, as every other mission within all of the Arcade League felt alright. With regards to what you unlock, you don't unlock game modes anymore, which I think is for the better. I am just someone who enjoys the idea of being able to play the game mode that I am more interested in more than anything else. So not having to go through the Arcade League to simply unlock something which I want to play is a nice change. You can simply unlock cheats and characters, which I think is perfectly fine when it comes to the rewarding aspect. The challenges on the other end do end up having a few more stinkers than the Arcade League. The challenge mode is pretty straightforward. You're given a situation where you are tasked with a unique ordeal, and it's up to you to make sure that you do the best that you can, as like with the Arcade League, you are rated on how well you perform when doing these, which helps to unlock characters and such. Alright, so the challenges I really didn't enjoy might as well just be all of the behead the undead challenges, especially the boxing cleaver challenge, which is honestly just not that fun really at all. You have to use the temporal link and throw boxes at zombies in a small tight area, which already blows because most of my time spent was trying to simply hold on to the box so that way I could properly throw it at the hordes of zombies waiting to take a good old nibble out of me. And since you have so many coming your way and surrounding you, it makes trying to fight them off to be a huge pain in the ass. Then you've got the challenge simply titled Don't Lose Your Bottle, and oh man, was I ready to lose my mind on this one. The objective is to shoot all the bottles on the map. Simple, right? Well, what if I told you that there were some bottles that are held by individuals on the map and they wave the damn thing around like it's a racket, not only making it extremely tricky to shoot, but if you end up shooting the individual, you get a penalty which adds more time to your timer? Yeah, this is usually the worst mission out of everything in the challenge mode. Then of course, with it being in the same category, you also have the one where you're throwing bricks around and smashing glass, which at first I was not happy to experience again, but was also caught off guard at the fact that after doing the challenge, that I would end up being rewarded with a platinum trophy, which I sat there like, what? But hey, they brought back some more TimeSplitters story classic themed levels, which I thought were pretty solid, and cat driving I kinda got a kick out of, but also ended up doing pretty well at that challenge, so it worked out in the end. And hey, you want my advice on the cat driving? Don't even bother braking, as I found myself falling over more often than not. Simply decelerate around corners and you should be solid for the most part. But yeah, everything else with regards to the challenges was alright, but definitely had some frustrating ones, that's for sure. With all that said, why don't we move on to the multiplayer and talk a little bit about it. So TimeSplitters Future Perfect still offers a plethora of customization options when it comes to creating your multiplayer matches. You can still change things such as the music that plays on the map you select, the weapons on the map, what type of bots you play against, how many bots you play against, etc. Needless to say, they still give you quite a bit of options on how to make your multiplayer matches different from the last. The maps themselves are pretty fun to play on as well, with some of the maps having sections of the campaign being playable here, which they actually still play out pretty nicely. Honestly, some maps have spawns where it's just straight up whack, where if you push the other players back a fair bit, like say on the map Training Ground, where you might find yourself easily being able to spawn kill the other team if you're given the chance to push them back that far, which definitely isn't balanced. Another map that had a similar deal to Training Ground would be the Mars Prison map, where spawn killing at least the bots anyways was really easy to do. It almost made me feel kinda bad for them, not gonna lie. The disco map was pretty fun as well, especially the music, which is just flat out awesome to listen to. Then you've got Siberia, which is pretty much a huge map with regards to scale, which includes some vehicles to drive around in, which is pretty awesome as they definitely help you get around the map much more easily. Bunker is also a pretty close quarters map, so if you get a hold of a shotgun, then you're basically gonna go to town on this map. But yeah, for the most part, the maps are pretty solid across the board, save for maybe a few exceptions. The characters that you can pick and choose from once again is insanely large, being at around 150 characters. Now, so unlike back in TimeSplitters 2, where the characters had 3 different stats, that being accuracy, agility, and stamina, TimeSplitters Future Perfect removes the accuracy stat, but then adds the stats shockproof and fireproof, which is exactly as it sounds. And I don't have too many thoughts with regards to these changes on the character stats, so if you were to ask me, I'd just be like, yeah, alright, that's cool, moving on. And hey, if you don't like the idea of characters having these individual stats, then you can simply turn that off when setting up your matches, so that way everyone is on the same playing field. Again, I like that Free Radical Design gives you the option, which is something that I really appreciate on their part for providing it. The weapons for TimeSplitters Future Perfect consist of mostly the same type of arsenal that was in TimeSplitters 2. You've got weapons like the good old shotgun, sniper rifle, tactical 12 gauge, minigun, god I love the minigun, plasma auto rifle, etc. But then you've got some new weapons like the flare gun, which is a nifty weapon when it wants to be. See, the thing with the flare gun is that it has the potential to be a one-shot, one-kill weapon if the flare lands on the target, but it certainly has the chance for the flare to just whiff entirely, so be careful when using it. Then you've got the returning sci-fi sniper rifle from the first TimeSplitters game, and it's pretty sweet here. It's not only a great long-range weapon, but you can also produce a protective shield, which is awesome as it allows for you to basically just say nah to any and all incoming fire. Then you've got the mag charger, which is a railgun with a thermal scope attached to it, and it can be a pretty devastating weapon, allowing for some serious damage and solid accuracy all around. And that is some of the new additions with regards to the weapons. And don't worry, there's still a few more I didn't even bring up. So just imagine the amount of weapons that you can play around with. With all that talk of the weapons out of the way, I'm going to briefly mention the game modes on offer because it's pretty much the same kind of modes from the last game. You have elimination, where it's simply a free-for-all with lives, and you just gotta hold out until you're the last individual standing. Pretty chaotic of a mode, not gonna lie. Then you have vampire, and it's basically where you have a meter that is constantly going down, and in order to fill it back up, you need to kill other players to bring it back to full. You also have lives in this mode, so just be a wee bit careful. Virus is where one person is infected, and it's up to them to infect everyone else on the map, and it's easily one of the scariest modes to play with some of the darker and horror-like maps, as not only the music that is typically played on those maps straight up nightmare fuel, they also added a sound effect that plays when someone who is infected is close by. A pretty neat addition, not gonna lie. Thief is pretty much where you kill other players and take their money in order to earn points, as killing the other players isn't enough. Shrink feels like kind of a redundant game mode, as it's basically deathmatch, but you are shrunken to where your placement is in the match. So for example, the person in last place is the smallest, while the person in first is basically the same size as normal. And yeah, there are a whole host of game modes on offer here that you could jump into and see what they're all about, as well as finding your favorite game types while doing so. Experiment them and see which ones you like and which ones you don't like. Oh yeah, and the power-ups from the previous game make a return here with things like speed, max damage, invisibility, and shrink. Something I do like what they did with the HUD is showcasing all of the power-ups and indicating which ones you have going on at the moment. With all that out of the way, let's move on to the graphics and music. So TimeSplitters Future Perfect pretty much came out near the end of the 6th generation of consoles, and needless to say, Free Radical Design went all out when it came to really making use of the hardware. The weapons and character models look truly fantastic, and most of the environments are packed with incredible attention to detail. Yeah, there may be a few instances where there's some blurry texture work, but overall, the presentation as a whole is a pretty big leap from the previous TimeSplitters game. The cutscenes have also seen a pretty big step up as well, with the characters being animated very fluently all throughout, and keeping the charm and wit for the vast majority of the scenes that appear throughout the campaign. I know this seems kind of odd to point out right here, but I like that there are a whole host of death animations that can play out depending on how you kill an enemy. Look, I don't know, it's a neat attention to detail, and it's something that you don't see all too often in games. But yeah, with regards to the visuals, everything looks pretty great, and it still holds up very well today if you were to ask me. And something that I should point out in case it wasn't obvious, the game itself is being emulated at a higher resolution. But even without emulation, the game itself still looks pretty good, and it's a testament to how good art design can really make a game hold up even several years later, at least visually. Oh yeah, and a funny little thing that I touched on back in my TimeSplitters 2 video was addressed here with the presentation, and that is that all the guns have unique reloading animations, so hey, it looks like they were able to finally get to adding this little detail. Don't worry guys, it's a simple joke I made back in my TimeSplitters 2 video. When it comes to talking about the music, it's pretty great stuff. Composed once more by Graeme Norgate, his work within TimeSplitters has been really solid across the board. The compositions are well done, and they play and fit very well within their respected scenes and areas throughout the game, whether that be in the campaign or in the multiplayer. So here are some of the tracks that to me are pretty solid. Here, have a listen. I will say though, while I didn't play the track here, the Mansion of Madness track is honestly one of the most nightmare fueling tracks ever created, as it sounds like something that was composed by some evil entity that happens to be lurking in the shadows. Don't listen to it at night if you value your sleep is all I'm trying to say. But yeah, across the board, you did a really solid job, Graeme, when composing the OST for the game. Moving on, why don't we go ahead and talk about the game's mapmaker mode. The mapmaker mode is something that I really do love that they continue to bring back for every installment in the TimeSplitters games, and this rendition of mapmaker has seen a fair amount of new additions to make building your own levels even more engaging. You have the beginner and advanced modes like in the previous games that you can pick and choose from at first, and I picked the beginner mode as just one look at the advanced mode and I was just all like, yep, basically meaning that I had no clue what I was doing when I picked the advanced mode. But yeah, the differences between the beginner and advanced modes are things such as having the map be exclusively one floor and not allowing for any sorts of details that you can throw in there, like barrels and boxes, along with the fact that you cannot make story levels in beginner mode. The advanced mode includes everything such as allowing to build multiple levels, create bunkers and trenches, create very detailed story levels, etc. You still have the ability to change the tile set of the level in which you are creating, but like with last time, you can't have certain parts in your level have a distinct tile set, as any and all changes to the tile set will affect the entire level. While I may not have the brains to create really detailed and well thought out story levels, there are a ton of creators out there that have showcased what they have made when it comes to utilizing the game's map maker system. I would highly recommend you to check out what other individuals have created online to truly understand the capabilities you have when creating levels when you really put your mind to it. I mean, I did make 2 maps in this mode, with one being horror themed and the other being sort of like a lab base, but no story levels. But these kinds of maps are nothing compared to what others have done, and it's quite honestly insane. And it really does showcase the level of creativity that some people have out there. So that, everyone, is TimeSplitters Future Perfect. Easily another solid entry in the TimeSplitters series, and is easily one of the best FPS games to be released on the 6th generation of consoles. Honestly, the amount of hours that I've put into this game is probably well into the hundreds over the years that I've been spent playing it. And for me, whenever I play a first-person shooter on a console, TimeSplitters is one of the games that I think of when console FPS games springs to mind. The controls feel tight as hell, the gameplay is still really satisfying, the arcade league is mostly pretty solid to play through, the challenges are kinda hit and miss, won't lie, but are bearable, and the map maker mode is expanded upon even further, allowing for even more customization. Free Radical Design, in my opinion anyways, seemed like they wanted to go all out with this entry, and it's easy to see that with everything that was put together here. While there are certainly criticisms to be made about the consistency with the game's storytelling, for me it isn't that much of a downside, as playing through it was not only fun, but really enjoyable to sit and watch Cortez interact with the residents of whatever time period he ended up traveling to. It's an easy recommendation from me personally, and I hope for all that have made it up to this point in the video, if you have played the game before, then I do encourage you to share some of your memories you have with the game in the comments section down below. Well everyone, that's going to be it for me, and if you enjoyed this video then please leave a like, and hey, even subscribe if you like what I do here. I'm not entirely sure when my next video will be on, but I hope to see you there when the video comes out. Have a good morning, afternoon, or evening everyone, and stay safe out there.